none of that is scriptural, but it is personal. And
but on the other hand, we as Christians, you're not lighthearted.
yeah, we're on. We're just now pressed the button. So yeah, we it. I think it is. I like to think of Saturday as a day of rest. If there, it's the most often the day that I get to study and read and prepare and not do anything. A lot of people, especially young people, like to do things on Saturday. I didn't go out anywhere yesterday. I had a lazy day yesterday, which is my typical Saturday that I like to have. And I'll do something on Friday night. But as you said, we often go out, and we almost always go out and eat on Sunday. And we would like for everybody to go to church, and yet we know that the people who are cooking for us and serving us there at the restaurant, that they didn't get to go to church that day. So, but this is not new. In Romans 14, Paul was talking about there are things some Christians just will not eat. There are some things, and it wasn't about the Jews not eating pork or other dietary prohibitions. You could actually get a very good deal on all different kinds of food in places, in great cities all around the world, because wherever paganism thrived, they always, one of the primary ways of worshiping was to offer food to the gods. Well, it was always more food than the priests or the temple servants could consume, and so they felt, well, it's all good, and we can sell it at a discount, even if it's not good. Some of it might be spoiled, or you have to trim some of it. And so they were always in the marketplace. There were these booths where they sold more or less the leftover offerings to raise funds for the temple, whatever pagan religion it was. And so many Christians will just go and say, well, it's like 50% off for hamburger meat. That used to be a bull that they offered to Zeus. Some Christians just thought, well, it's been offered to a god. You can't eat that. Paul's idea was, well, if that bothers them, then don't push the item. But he says, if they just give me a hamburger, if I'm over at their house and they just give me a hamburger, he says, I'm not going to ask where it came from. I'm just going to eat it. But he says, if they tell me, that's been offered to idols. He says, if they tell me, then I'm not going to eat the hamburgers. And it seems like, that sounds like so much nonsense. But as in Romans 14, it was the kind of thing that people had a falling out about, and they fought about. And so there are things you can do on Sunday, things that you can and can't do. There was an adult couple. I don't as loosely throw the word old around as I once did. I had an adult couple that I married many years ago. And both of them were very fine Christians, though he was a Seventh-day Adventist. Now, there are Seventh-day Baptists, but that means the Adventists, they have church on Saturday. And she is a Southern Baptist always. And so both of them went to his church on Saturday, and to her church, he came with her on Sunday. It's like being punished, sounds like to me. But they enjoyed it. They both enjoyed their churches. Sometimes she would come back and ask me about some of the things that they believed. I try to be well read about things. To the unbeliever, I fear sometimes it looks like a lot of confusion. It looks like, and I think sometimes it's because we make it so. However, many of the things that most of the things we believe in seem to have been God's idea. And they seem to be important to him. Though, we did study in the prophets as they come on, and God sent the prophets to the people of Israel. God says, I'm so sick of your holy days and your new moons and your feasts and your sacrifices. He said, they're just making me sick. So, they were going through the motions of observing the letter of the law, and yet God knew that they were not right in their hearts, and they were also mingling in idol worship along with all that other. I'm not completely sold on religion. I'm not certain. I think it sounds obsequious to say I'm not a religious person, being a pastor or a Christian. But religion seems to turn me off religious practice. A lot of religious observance, even Christian observance, as I've gotten older, I've become less and less inclined to the letter of the law or even Christian doctrine. And this may sound, I know that it sounds pompous. Just my relationship with Jesus has become paramount in my faith in the last 30 years. That does sound arrogant. I say, I'm not religious. I just love Jesus. I know how that sounds. But I guess what I'm trying to do, and I think what he wants us to do, is to pursue what we think it will be like with him in heaven, the kind of relationship we'll have, the kind of conversation we'll have, in heaven, and to have that, to start practicing that here. For me, I can think, I don't think we'll be hungry or have need for physical nourishment in heaven, but I can't imagine being in heaven for a long time not wanting a cheeseburger. I just, we talked about relationships last Sunday a little bit, and the Bible does say that when we, in Revelation, of course, it's we'll only know then if he was speaking figuratively or about reality. But it's going to be a big feast when we get there, the marriage supper of the Lamb. Wonder what they'll serve. For Terry, I hope it's macaroni and cheese. Wherever we eat, whether with a family or whatever, I tell people, if they have mac and cheese, I tell them I don't have to eat it. I'm not required. I've eaten my share over 47 years of marriage. So I'm not required to do that. There does seem to be, yes, there are rules and laws and commands, and yet we see so much even in the Old Testament. And Jesus came along, and Jesus was saying, he says, you strain at a gnat and swallow a camel. Like, this is so important. And then something that really is important, you just come along and just gobble it down. He seemed to be so iconoclastic. We're going to look at a story today in John chapter 5 where he healed a man on the Sabbath. And he did things like that on purpose, just to make people mad. Because he even told that man to take up his bed and walk. And there's not anything about carrying your bed on the Sabbath in the Old Testament law. But they felt like they were so serious about the Sabbath laws that they actually amplified it a lot. They added a lot of stuff to it. So, oh no, that's like work. I still think it's so funny. You go to the Holy Land, and they many of the upper class people in Jerusalem would take their families to stay in the local motels, so that they didn't have to work, they didn't have to cook, they didn't have to clean, and they did that regularly. That was like something they did. Maybe they didn't do it every Sabbath. We said the motels we were staying in when they were just flooded with people on the Sabbath, and they believed they didn't even believe in punching the button on the elevator. They had programmed the elevators to stop at every floor. So if you're staying in a 14-story building, which some of them were, and you got on there, it's going to stop at every floor till they got to your floor, because punching the button is like somebody has earned a living at doing that, as operating an elevator. I saw a guy, his family was hauling their luggage up the stairs, and I wonder if he was going to lug those 5 pieces of baggage up the stairs for 14 floors, and I was going to go there to him. I said, so this is not working. Very insensitive of me. Ginger Culver, Andy's friend, had her surgery, and I've communicated with her through Facebook, and it went well. She had a surgical procedure on Friday, and she is recovering. But can keep praying for her. Terry's aunt, Linda Martin, they're trying. She's recovering from pneumonia. Her husband died last year, and it was Linda and Larry are just like that. Linda and Larry, Larry and Linda. But they are no longer a pair. Larry went on last year. Linda had a birthday on the 8th, Leon Award on the 10th, and I had my 67th birthday on Friday. So Friday the 13th is not always an unlucky day. However, I did mention, I mentioned to Barbara, I don't know if welcome to our class this morning if you're joining us for Sunday school. They left Friday afternoon to go to a dance competition that was Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I watched some of that online last night. There were 4 dances that my granddaughters danced in, and honestly, I couldn't tell which one she was or they were. Lots of little girls on a stage running around and dancing, and I'll have to get them to say, "That's me right there, Pops," and get them. So that's a. I talked with Henry yesterday. We did have a pipe burst here at the church a couple of weeks ago, and so Henry and Linda and Andy, that's really Danny, my brother, and my brother-in-law Joey have been working on tearing out some carpet down the hall, removing some baseboard, and it was. I think we had a lot of water damage. I think the insurance will cover it, but thanks to the people who were troubled by that, and I didn't even know about it until I guess all of it was about over. Ned and Betsy have gotten back home. She's no longer doing the Tuesday and Thursday trip, but she has some testing that's still trying to get her into being able to swallow normal food. Went to Las Vegas, and you take your food puree machine with you, You have to puree and everything that you're going to be trying to consume, liquids and pudding consistency food. It doesn't sound appetizing, and my heart goes out to her. Looking down through our list, and James Ward was hospitalized back before Christmas, and the last time he was at church, he didn't look well. Didn't look like he felt well. I guess I should say that. But I'll pray for. Think of James every day. Danny Ward has been his daughter-in-law, Wes's wife. She is now stateside. She got to leave Kuwait. She's back home, at least in the United States. She got to be with her family for Christmas. I've seen some photos. We the Bain's buried. One of our there's not many Bains left, and Grady Paul Bain we buried him this week. Was really a second cousin, but he and my dad were raised together by Grady's dad, and so he always seemed to be an uncle to us. He was of that age and that demeanor. But Grady, like my dad and like Howard, one of a kind. All of them were unique in their special way. And even the three of them were not comparable. Praying for each other. This is a new edition of Barbara. If you got one last week, I made a mistake last week. I put Henry's birthday in February. There are new ones out there. You've got it. You're on the ball. Thank you. But on the back are some things that are what I consider here at Walnut Grove Baptist Church ways to shine. And it's kind of this has to do more, I guess, with my sermonic message this morning and during the worship hour. I guess most often people who are active in church, or that church is a part of their Christian faith, probably are involved in some kind of activity, church-related activity. These are things that one might do or might wish to do or find that God might richly bless them in these kinds of things. I think of these as ministries, as opportunities. I've only listed 35. I think there are many, many more. But the pandemic made us close our doors and start broadcasting. And there are many things on this list that one might do to say, this is something that I can do. This is something I would enjoy doing. And these are the things that if someone did them, they would be a blessing to others. And God would reward. Now, so I posted this on my Facebook page last night, so that list is there. But during the pandemic, before the pandemic, most often if there was a need or if there was a lack or if there was an opportunity, the pastor or other leaders in the church might approach someone and ask them if they would undertake to lead or manage this ministry. But I don't know how involved people want to be now. I might be asking them to expose themselves in ways that they're not willing or able. And so, however, that's made me re-examine some things. You know, I think that there are people in Christian service, maybe all around the world, who are only doing anything that they do because someone asked them to. I like to think of myself as someone that if you ask me for help or if you ask me to do something, that I would do my best to see if I could comply. I was sitting in a church parking lot several months ago. Maybe I shouldn't even say this at all, but that hardly ever stops me. Maybe if Terry was here, she could pinch me. I was eating my supper. I'd just gone out. I'd been working all day, and I needed to get out of the house. I went and bought a box of chicken or something, and I was in a parking lot at the church, and a lady pulled up, and she said she'd been trying to get someone to come to the door at the church, and it was really very late. It was probably like 6:30, 7 o'clock. She said, nobody here will help me. I said, well, it's pretty dark there. I don't think anybody's here. So she saw my car. Maybe, are you acquainted, associated with this church? I said, no, this is not my church. I guess I was being maybe uncharitable at all, because I'd been talking to people on the phone all day long. I really didn't want to talk to anybody. And I don't think I was in a bad mood, but I think if I don't, and I feel this way, have been feeling like this more often in my latter years. If I don't have some time where it's just me and God sitting here with a piece of chicken, I'm going to lose my mind. You know, I've got to really get myself together. But she pulled up. I was polite, and I rolled down my window, and she says, "Do you have any money you could give me?" And as a matter of fact, I didn't. And I said, "No." And if I'd had money, a pocket full of money, just something, I don't know, you know, not something spooky, wasn't anything about her, but I just for someone to accost me, I guess I never respond to that well. Just someone stopped me on the street and say, "Can I have some money?" I thought, well, I would never do that, even if I needed money. I don't think. Maybe might be dire circumstances. And I said, "No," I said, I don't have anything that I can give you, that I'm going to give you. I'm sorry. And then she said, "It's because I'm black, isn't it?" And then something in my mind said, "See there, this person doesn't deserve your money. This is not the kind of person that you would ever give a dime to, because she thinks you're withholding something from you because you think she's black." And I said, "No, ma'am, it's not because you're black." And she actually said that. She asked me that several more times in our conversation. And I thought, my goodness, it was obvious when we began talking that she was a black woman, but my goodness, I've never withholden anything that I've had. The more and more she talked, and the more profane and vulgar she was, it's not, you know. And then, should you only give to people who deserve it or who are good people? Well, that's not my standard either. It's just that this is not the kind of person who should prosper from being crude and rude and being ungracious and ungrateful, and they felt so deserving. I guess I can't say that I was in the right. I can't say that I was righteous. I can't say that I was being a good Christian, but I certainly was being human, I guess. And so I asked the Lord, if that was wrong, please forgive me. But I almost got to a place where I say, "No, I do have something for you. If you'll just pull a little bit closer over here, I'm going to punch you in the nose." And I'll give it. So I'm thinking, yeah, that sounds more like me. Doesn't sound like very Christian. But let's pray for these on our list. And these are opportunities to serve. And they're not laws, and they're not regulations or commandments. And so they might have opportunity of being of greater benefit than those kind of things ever did. It seems that Jesus came along to say, you know, when you guys are really, really stressed out about keeping all the commands and being righteous, and he says, you're just really not doing a very good job at anything. Well, here in John's Gospel, chapter 5, I've rambled on most half of our class, and there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now, there was at Jerusalem, by the sheep market, a pool, which is called in the Hebrew tongue Bethesda. I've actually been there. They've excavated that place, the pool of Bethesda. It was the kind of public place where they actually carved that kind of thing. When you excavate or do the archaeology, you say, well, this is the pool of Bethesda, and there's no question or doubt. Having 5 porches. Now, think of this. Jerusalem is really quite a modern city, but you might just turn a corner from a huge skyscraper in Jerusalem and be in the market or in a place where it just looks like this is the way it looked when Jesus was here, and it was like it was ancient, or like you've stepped back into the past. And so right in the middle of the city of Jerusalem, there's this big, there's a fence around it, but there's this big, things that happened a long time ago, they're not up here on the ground. You've got to, over time, just dust and dirt and debris layers things up, and so they always have to dig down, and so there's just like this huge hole that is a place of 5 porches. And on these porches lay a great multitude, it says in the King James Version, impotent or powerless folk who were sick. They were handicapped in some way, we would say, of blind, halt, withered, waiting for the moving of the water.
Is there any record that actually cured the first person that got in it?
I don't think so. I think this was superstition. I think it was a myth. I don't think it ever happened. I may be wrong, and but these people, and that's one point of the lesson, I guess. Here's what it says: for an angel went down at a certain season. When people start saying, some people say, or a long time ago, just really vague. I heard once, and that's what this is. An angel came into the pool and troubled the water. In other words, made it froth or foam, made it bubble up, made it disturbed in some way, disturbed the water. And whoever then first, after the troubling of the water, stepped in was made whole of whatsoever disease he had. With anything, and I don't know the extent to which the Pool of Bethesda may or may not be referred to in other. It's obviously an archaeological reality. It was a reality. It was a place. There is no record of this story. It's not told. Josephus doesn't mention anything like this in the history of the Jews, the antiquities of the Jews. I believe that this is just, I think we use this little old wives' tale, something like that. Old wives have nothing better to do than make up fantasies. But I believe that these people were just desperate. Maybe they had been to what passed for physicians in their days. They tried home remedies. Many of them had been like this since they were born. Some of them had been in accidents or diseased. But they heard a story that an angel came down and he caused the water to trouble. And if you could dive into the pool, be the first in, you would be healed.
Which verse did you read about the angel?
Verse 4. Verse 4. An angel went down to a certain night. If you have another version, it may be a little bit different.
It's not even in. Let's see.
There are, which indicates that in some manuscripts, the angel may not be referred to at all.
This one, my Bible doesn't refer to that.
Let me see in our quarterly.
Well, it starts at verse
64.
5. I think our quarterly starts at verse 5.
Yeah. Probably maybe to avoid that, yeah. Let me see, John. To avoid that very question. It's been a while since I've studied the manuscripts or the Greek text for this passage, but it does seem to ring in my mind that this verse about the angel may have just even been a later insertion, which casts greater doubt upon it as to probably when John wrote this, he didn't even qualify or give credence to the story about the angel at all. But verse 4, if it's not in modern translations, do you have any kind of footnote or any kind of notification there on verse 4?
Some manuscripts include here, wholly or in part, paralyzed, and they waited for the moving of the waters. From time to time, an angel of the Lord would come down and stir up the waters. Okay, that's the footnote.
So a footnote saying, yeah, some manuscripts. There are thousands of manuscripts, and there's a great debate among great linguistic scholars as to, it's textual criticism. It's a way of, and we take into I don't feel threatened by Yes, there were many manuscripts, and none of them are precisely identical. There are no two of all the different Greek manuscripts that we have of the Gospel of John. There are no two of them that are exactly identical because they were all copied by hand, and sometimes there were some mistakes not made. Now, there are, and you can find, if you have a modern translation, they still try to be careful. For instance, if you get when we get along to John's Gospel, chapter 8, the story of the woman taken in adultery, that seems to be very obvious to be an insertion, a story that was just put in. John probably didn't write that, but someone thought it was true. Maybe they'd even seen it. I believe it's a genuine Jesus story, but I don't think John included it in his original gospel. So, all right, I'm glad that you call that out. There may be people who are reading along with us in a different translation today. I use Bible Gateway on the internet, and it will, like, if you pull up one verse, it'll like give you 20 different very common or useful translations. I've heard people speak of Bible translations with disdain. Why don't we just keep the good old King James Version? Well, since 1611, we have found thousands of copies of the Bible, and it would be negligent, I think, not to read them and look at them, compare them, see what differences there are, and here is the difference. A certain man was there which had an infirmity 38 years, and when Jesus saw him lying there, he knew that he had been there a long time in that case, and he said to him, "Would you like to be made whole?" Seems like a ridiculous question, doesn't it? The impotent man answered him, the crippled man said, "Sir, I have no man, when the water is troubled, to put me into the pool. But while I am coming, another steppeth down before me." It almost sounds like he's seen it happen before and he wasn't able to get in on it. So it's just but it still sounds very much like a Bigfoot sighting in some regard. Well, I don't know what has given this credence. Jesus doesn't give it any credence at all. He doesn't give it any respect at all. He doesn't say, "Well, I'll sit here and wait with you, and when it gets bubbled up, I'll toss you over in there." Jesus said to him, "Rise, take up your bed and walk." And immediately the man was made whole, and he took up his bed and walked. And on that same day was the Sabbath. Instead of giving perhaps wisdom or answers, just maybe more to think about, more questions perhaps. I think Dallas Jenkins' treatment of this story in The Chosen is one of the best video or theatric presentations of a Bible story that I've ever seen. Jesus comes in, and there are just these crippled people lying everywhere, sick, blind, all it says. And Jesus asked him, "Would you like to be made whole?" And the man starts babbling on about the babbling. Jesus, in this theatrical presentation, Jesus kind of slides over into his view intentionally, where he's standing between the man is saying, the water. To me too, I try to get in the water, and Jesus slides over there and he says, "Hey, look at me. Don't look at the water. There's nothing for you in that water. Never has been. There's nothing for you there. It's not going to help you. Your answer is not in this story, or even if it's real. That's nothing's going to touch you." Now, this just has a cornucopia of things to pray about and think about and to seek God's mind about. First of all, if God or if Jesus can heal people, why didn't he just heal everybody? That's a big question. And it's a simplistic question that's asked most often by unbelievers. The idea or the thought that God owes you a dime or owes me anything, or that since God is God, there's a lot of things that I deserve from him. To assume that is nuts. Since you're the president, you should give me everything that I want and everything that I need. I think the thought that if there is a God and there is sickness and pain in the world, then if there was a God, he'd just fix everything. God has existed for eternity. I bet you dimes to a donut that God has created worlds before where he did not allow sickness or pain or hunger. I don't think it went very well. I think it's that if God has been creating for all eternity, and I think he has, it's just mind-blowing. You think this world is the only world he's ever created? I think when we get to heaven, God's going to say, I made a world a bajillion years ago. They never got sick. They didn't have any pain, no physical deformities of any kind, no handicaps. Didn't go well. Wasn't a good experiment. There were some things those people never learned. They never appreciated. They never understood. People who never hurt or suffered or cried or wept. How many paintings would we have? How many books would have been written if people hadn't been sad or lonely? Or would anybody would say, I really feel great, and things are going my way, and everything, my life is perfect. I think I'm going to invent a musical element called the blues. No, you wouldn't do that. Would people ever dance? Would they have ever written a poem? How much? I don't like to cry, but there's value in tears. I have no doubt. Well, anyway, there's the healing question. Also, Jesus comes up and he goes, excuse me, and he's stepping over crippled people to get to this one person. Excuse me, pardon me. Oh, let me just get all of these sick people, and he only heals one of them. It seems to indicate to me that there's something more important than this man. He couldn't walk, and now he can walk. Is that all that healing is? Or that this man was lame and Jesus can heal him? Well, he didn't heal everybody. Could he have? I don't have much doubt at all. Jesus could have healed them all. Why didn't he? Well, that's the question, is that what's important? We might think, it's very frivolous and often irreverent. There's a movie called Bruce Almighty. Have you ever seen it? It's where a young man who's a television reporter, he actually meets God. He thinks he's really complaining. He thinks his life is insignificant, and that he's not happy with his life. So he meets God, who just happens to be Morgan Freeman. Man, Morgan does a good God. But he meets God, and God says, okay, I'm going to give you all my powers. You can be God. And so the name of the movie is Bruce Almighty. So it's played by Jim Carrey. So Bruce has all the powers of God for a limited time, and he can do anything he wants to. It's a disaster. Everything he thinks would be just wonderful if God just waved his hand and made all these things happen. And then in this Hollywood presentation of what would that be like, it is a total disaster. Finally, he comes back to God and he says, please take these God powers away from me, because obviously I have no idea what I'm doing. Because everything he did, like he had a computer that had everybody's prayers on it. So he just hit enter, answered everybody's prayers. Oh, it almost turned the world upside down. It was the most terrible, awful thing. because of what people were praying for was almost always nonsense. So, I think we as human beings, we have a very limited ability to understand. And the key is that he didn't heal everybody. He just say, okay, I can do it. And I could make all physical affliction go away. I could just make it all go away. I'm going to make it go away in this man's life. But I'm saying something here, and to be honest with you, it's more about what you can do and what you can't do on the Sabbath than it has anything to do with this man being able to walk. Because Jesus said, take up your bed and walk. And then the fact that Jesus did this on the Sabbath, that is where the significance is. Sometimes I know me as a human being, I place the meaning in the wrong place. I used to have a teacher that says we put the emphasis on the wrong syllable. We miss the point. Life, the life God's given us, is so very, very brief and so short. This is really out of place, but in one of the modern Batman movies, the Riddler and Two-Face have actually defeated Batman, and they've knocked him out. He's unconscious before them, and Two-Face reaches into his coat and pulls out a huge gun, points it right at Batman, and he's going to shoot him. And the Riddler stops him. He says, Don't kill him. If you kill him, he won't learn nothing. Don't kill him. If you kill him, he won't never learn nothing. Well, for the Riddler, it was very, very important. More important than being rid of Batman was for Batman to learn something, to get it. If you just killed him, he's just gone. But if you can affect him in some way, then that has value. Well, what is the difference between this angel story, the water story, and our belief in Jesus? Are both of them affectations? Are they just two different forms of superstition? I think that human beings, we manufacture and we create a lot of fantastic stories, a lot of fiction, a lot of imagination. And I think for God to be in the miracle business is always problematic. Remember the story of Moses, that Moses went before Pharaoh and he turned the water red with blood, and then his staff turned into a snake. You remember what Pharaoh did? He called in his magicians, his court magicians, and they did the same things. They did magic tricks. So Pharaoh said, it's all tricks. So I wrote a book many years ago called More Than Miracles, where I don't think that God's best work is miracles. I think it's when he does the hard stuff, when he decides not to do anything miraculous, is where Jesus seems to shine. Well, when Jesus was in the wilderness and being tempted by the devil said, here, take these stones and turn them into bread. And Jesus said, no, I'm not going to do that. I could do a miracle and change the stones into bread, but he says, I'm not going to do that. It's more important for me to be hungry. I've got something to say about being hungry and not doing miracles than I do about doing something miraculous. Well, as I said, this doesn't lay everything to rest. The religious people wanted to bring this guy in, and as often with these kinds of people, it bothered them. Instead of this guy couldn't walk, and Now he can walk. What was keeping them awake at night was that this guy was carrying his bed on the Sabbath. And I think that's really what this story is about, saying, you know what? You're looking at things and you're not seeing it. You don't have eyes to see. You're looking right at it and you can't see it. And all miracles are temporary. You know, this guy couldn't walk for 38 years. I don't know how long he lived, but he walked the rest of his life, maybe. I don't know if he did or not. But he's dead now. He's been dead a long time. And he died of something. He didn't just dissolve into dust. He got tuberculosis or cancer. He had a brain hemorrhage or a stroke. He had a heart attack. Something human happened to him after this story. Who knows? Maybe 40 years, 50 years, maybe 20 years, maybe a week later he dropped dead. But he's dead. And he's been turned to dust for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. The fact that Jesus made him walk didn't make him invincible or more than human. Something still very, very human happened to him, and his life ceased, and he's been dead a long time. Miracles, all miracles are temporary. Jesus fed the thousands. They came back the next day for lunch. We've got to see what he's trying to say. And he said, I'm not trying to eliminate this from all humanity. He says, I'm trying to tell you something, and you're not listening. No, that's my take, Barbara. Good questions. Good questions. I'm glad. I hope you enjoyed that. And boy, you made Henry listen, so maybe I owe him a cigar or something.
Well, he got to be in his recliner.
Did he?
So.
Well, what was his impression? Did he have an evaluation or a report, or?
Not really.
Thank you for taking a taste of that.